Welcome to the show, Brain Health, Unchaining Your Pain. I am really excited to welcome the wonderful Robert Pardi on the show today. Welcome, Rob.
Thank you very much.
So for those that don't know Rob, following his wife's death, Robert reassessed his life and decided to share the many lessons he learned by becoming a certified life coach, keynote speaker, and most recently, author. In addition, he pursued his childhood dream to live in Italy, what a fabulous place, and now lives in the same small Italian village his great-grandfather immigrated from. Robert is the author of Chasing Life, A Pimby Tale, and soon to be released Possibility in Action. And I have loved your story that you shared about your wife, Desiree. Rob, welcome to the show. It's such a pleasure to have you on.
It's a great pleasure for me. It's an honor because I've watched a few of your shows and they're very impactful. So I hope I live up to your other guests.
Oh, thank you for the feedback. That's really kind. So before we dive into your story, I'd love to know what you're really passionate about in life right now.
Honestly, to tell you the truth, it is writing. It is the art of storytelling. It came out all because I wrote the book about my wife.
Yeah. But
it really reconnected me to the joy of writing that I had when I was a kid. And we're probably going to talk about everything. So I didn't grow up in an ideal environment, let's say.
Yeah.
And writing was not considered something little boys did. So it was something that I just pushed down. And I've realized, I think we're all here to express ourselves.
Yeah.
And writing for me, all three books are different pieces of me. And I'm starting to really just realize how beneficial it is for me, but also how purposeful it's become.
Yeah. Do you know, I really love that. I wrote a book when I was a kid, actually, about it, just brought it back to me. Because we are perceived to have ghosts in our house when I was a kid.
Oh,
and
wow.
I wrote a story. My dad actually saw two children sitting on the stairs in our house where we lived at in Forest Edge. And I was always a bit scared in the house that we were growing up in, because we always had these weird sounds and the door open and closed and stuff. I actually wrote a book as a child about a child, you know, and experiencing living with ghosts and the story of that. So I think it's so important that we reconnect with our childhood ambitions and dreams and imagination, because it's something that we all have, but we kind of bury, don't we, as we grow up, or circumstances within our life cause our imagination to get squashed or diminished in some way.
So much so. It's so funny you talk about that and you use some words that are so important to me, like a Pimby tale. Actually, that's an acronym for possibility, imagination, magic, believing, and you. And what I've realized is those are so important, which we do bury down because we become adults. And there's some amazing statistics, like children, they laugh around 300 times a day. And adults laugh 5 times a day.
5. Wow.
Yeah, that's an ouch, right? Like, how did we let that all go? And that's part of the story with my wife and everything taught me so much. And I was very playful with her, but I've become even more playful at this age because I want to reconnect to that. And I think it's so healthy for me to connect to that.
And I know that you traveled back to your childhood place as well. Was that part of that desire to reconnect with that childhood essence of you that maybe you lost touch with?
Oh, you mean to move here?
Yeah. Actually,
it was my great grandfather. So I knew him, which is amazing.
Wow.
I didn't know my paternal grandfather because he died before I was born, but my great grandfather, Antonio, I knew. But it wasn't necessarily coming here to reconnect to anything from my childhood, except for the dream of wanting to live in Italy.
Yeah.
But it was more wanting to be in control of my life. And the experience with Desiree, my wife, her name was Desiree, and the experience with Desiree was understanding pursuing dreams and living what we called all in. And so I looked at my life and I said, what is the story I want to look back on? And it was, and I'll use this word specifically, it was the attempt to live this crazy dream. I learned early on to leave the word try to the side, because we have equated try with an excuse of something not happening, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I'll try is sort of saying like, but you can't hold me accountable if it doesn't work. You know, 'cause I tried.
I was like, don't try, just do.
Exactly. And so that's part of why I moved here. It was really to recreate everything.
That's amazing. And I know we're going to dive into your story, but before we do, what does optimal brain health mean for you personally?
Oh, that's such a great question. And for me, it really is not being swayed, where I'm still navigating my ship. So when the big waves come, it's not letting it capsize the boat. Or when there's no wind to push me, it's not that I'm just sitting there being inactive. And so it's part of that idea of possibility in action. The book is actually the hashtag or the personal philosophy I follow, that I created that as something to guide me. And, you know, optimal brain health is finding the joy in all the different colors of the rainbow that life really is. Yeah.
Do you know, I think that's so important. And, you know, it's finding that meaning as well, isn't it? In every step of our journey, that often we forget that there's meaning in everything that we do. And I love that you say that the ship analogy of optimal brain health is not being swayed, not letting your ship capsize, because so we are in control of our own ship. And we're not necessarily in control of the waves. And like I think that the waves that we sail on are waves of emotion. So we might be in an emotional ocean, as it were. But it's making sure that we navigate that ocean of emotion in an effective way, and ride the waves rather than fight the waves. And use them to propel us forward, as you would do in an ocean. It is to navigate through in an effective way, and not become a victim of the circumstances, and allow our boat to capsize by not learning how to sail it effectively.
I love how you really colored the analogy. The ocean of emotion. I'm blown away by that. But there's so many different things in what you said. First, there is a technique which I'm sure you know, which is called riding the wave.
Yeah.
So you don't react right away to that emotion. Just let it come and see where it goes. Right.
Yeah.
But this all sort of ties to resilience to a certain extent, which I think we've been sold a bill of goods where we think only certain people are resilient, and we're all resilient. I mean, as a species, we've shown we're resilient. We're
designed to be resilient, otherwise we wouldn't survive.
And it's tapping into that, right?
Yeah.
I'm a nerd when it comes to superheroes and science fiction and all that other stuff. So it's like Luke in the Force, right? Instead of waiting for our back to be against the wall and saying, I can't take one more thing, why can't we tap into it now and always have that resilience present? And that's, like you said, it's when you ride the wave, you'd shift your mindset from the fear of the wave capsizing you to it being more like a roller coaster, where it's, you know what? Yeah, I'm excited about this ride.
Right, exactly. And then it becomes fun and challenging and enjoyable, hopefully.
Hopefully, yeah. I'm not a big roller coaster fan, but you know.
But you, like you say, it does switch your mindset, doesn't it? It's because you're not fearing the wave, but you're leveraging its power, and emotions have power, and you're leveraging it to help you rather than to hurt you.
100%.
So I'd love to dive into your story.
Sure.
And you can take us back as far as you like. Take us to Desiree. Take us to your childhood. Where would you like to go?
I'll blend them.
Okay.
Because if it wasn't for the way I grew up, I'm almost certain I couldn't have been who I was for Desiree. 100%. So I grew up as the son of an abusive alcoholic father. Where, you know,
and was that through your whole life from birth? He was abusive and alcoholic, or did it happen?
No, from when I can remember, actually.
Okay.
So the earliest memories of that, and you know, at first you don't know, right? And when I think back on it, I was trying to really figure out the inconceivable because I didn't understand alcoholism.
Sure.
And that led to, I think, being more self-aware. Also, you know, you become a people pleaser. You try to twist yourself into knots to make sure things don't happen. But there came a point, and really I have to thank his mother for this, my paternal grandmother.
Is that Mary? Was it?
Mary. Yeah, I call her Crazy Mary in the book, don't I? That's Mary, or Grandma Fella. And she would say to me when I was young, look at your father. Don't be like that.
Yeah.
He's a slave to these things. And there came a point in time, I was 13, I finally fought back. And physically I was strong enough. And that was the last time he ever touched me. And from that point forward, I really dug my heels in. And that's how I wound up getting into finance, because for me, it was get good grades, get a high-paying job, and have freedom. And money was freedom. So all of those life lessons helped me understand grit and resilience and perseverance and all these things. Then I meet this amazing girl, basically. She was 17, I was 19. I mean,
and she was very forthright on your first
meet. She certainly was. She she let me know that she wanted me. Yeah. For sure. And the way I grew up, I really didn't value relationships, let's say. I didn't want to be in because I felt so trapped as a kid. But she broke me down. She broke me down. Soon after meeting her, I already had told my mom I met the woman I was going to marry. I was all in, like, and we really were.
And you were 19 when you did that. You know, you were very young. I was 19
when I met her.
She was 17, is that right?
She was 17. I was 19 when I told my mom I met the woman that I was going to marry. I proposed when I was 20 and she was 18.
Wow.
Did the whole thing too. I went up to her parents, you know, I asked her questions. And we were that disgusting couple that always held hands, always kissed. We were always together. We went to each other's classes. I mean, it was incredible.
Joined at the hip.
Totally joined at the hip. Totally. And she was a very determined woman. You know, from the moment I met her, she explained to me her philosophy of non-judgment, which was basically she didn't want to even judge herself. So she never knew any of her grades. She asked me to look at the grades. I filled them in on applications. So for her, it was always doing her best. And we got married. We were very symbiotic in that we both lifted each other up. We both fed off of each other. We both wanted to broaden our horizons, expand our comfort zone, She entered the MD PhD program at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York,
Yeah.
Mount Sinai University. And I was offered a job in the Middle East at the Abu Dhabi Investment Authority. She was doing her PhD. So she said, hey, you know what? This is great. I really have to study. I have to write this all. You go there. It's a great opportunity for us. I took less money and more vacation in the package. So we met every 6 weeks in a different country. So we would
wow.
meet in Paris. So all the money I was supposed to save doing that, by the way, we were spending. But anyway, she finishes her PhD and she said, Robert, before I finish the MD, let me take a year off and I'll come live in the Middle East with you. Let's experience it together. Great idea. Well, to get a residency visa in the UAE, you have to go through a health screening. And it's basically for contagious types of diseases. But I said, you know what, why don't you just do a full screening? Why not, right? And that's when they diagnosed her right before her 31st birthday with stage 3B breast cancer.
Wow.
Now, looking back,
and she had no idea at the time.
She didn't have an idea, but we did know that there was a tumor a year earlier. But this was 1997. She was 29 years old at that time. She had a history of cystic breasts. They weren't going to do a scan. You know, they weren't going to do a mammogram. It just wasn't part of the culture back then. So when we were in Dubai, we went to the American hospital in Dubai. He said, let me just do a needle aspiration. And no fluid came out. At that point, I was completely naive about everything. And I saw her face. And I asked her afterwards, and she said, that's not a good sign. So already there was a lot of this anxiety. When they took the tumor out, they had done a lumpectomy. And it came back cancerous. And then 3 days later, she had to have the radical mastectomy. She only had it on one side. Back then, they didn't do all the reconstruction. It was, so she had to deal with a lot. That changed everything. And I have to say, when she was diagnosed, though when I look back now, she was probably metastatic. It probably wasn't stage 3B because the scans weren't as good as they are now. You know, there was no PET scan back then. So, but we were a team. Let's get it done. We're going to beat this. She was very aggressive. But the one thing she said when she was diagnosed, and was interesting because the doctor in Dubai told me, and not because of the Muslim religion, not because he was a man, he, I don't think, knew how to break news to this young, vibrant American woman. And he told me. So I said, let me tell my wife. And when I went to tell her, I said, Robert, I know too much to be dangerous to myself. So I don't want to know anything. I just want to know the next steps. And that laid the groundwork for us to really become this team. Now, when the cancer recurred, I fell apart. Because all of a sudden my whole Superman identity of getting her through this and let's fight this together crumbled right in front of my eyes. I realized that now I couldn't save her. And the interesting thing was I saw her trying to help me. And I realized, well, that's not what this equation is supposed to be. And in that, I started drinking. There were a lot of, I couldn't process it all. And when I realized that she was trying to help me, I think in a way I remembered my mother always trying to help my father. And I was like, oh no, that pattern is not going to be repeated here. And so I just, from one moment to the next, I understood surrender and I understood purpose. I mean, it all became very, very clear because I had to stop trying to figure it out and think long term and a cure or a hope, and I had to think about what could I do today? What's under my control today? And the beautiful thing in that was I redefined hope that hope was not going to be future focused. It was the hope for a great day today. The other thing that it did is I truly understood this big word purpose, which I say all the time. You know, we all think we need to be an Oprah or a Greta saving the universe. And no, it could be the smallest thing. It could be cooking a meal for your family. The thing is, don't stick on Instagram. It's not to stick on Instagram. It's that you want to give away the results. So I came up with purpose is when my passions came in alignment with my values, and I wanted to give the results away.
Oh, that's lovely. I love that. And I think people forget about that, don't they? Where it's so important to do what's, you know, to be in alignment with your values, to feel that you are on the right trajectory, and you're living, you know, from your core, not just your head, but your heart. And that's so important. And I love also that you said that hope isn't about necessarily the future, or being future focused, but we have another guest on the show, Amy Kardashian, who had a very war-torn experience in episode 4. She talked about hope is having open possibilities every day.
I love
so
that.
It's very much a, you know, in the day, in the moment activity, and looking at it from that respect.
Yeah, it's, you know, of course you want dreams and ambition and goals and ambition for the future, but, and I know it was so hard for me to understand as well, but we're only living right now. So what is it that, and this is how my wife and I, we learned, and literally, honestly, I look back on that period, even during that period, it was joyful. People ask me all the time, but you had to carry, it was an 11-year journey. I was the one that received the news. Well, now the cancer has moved from her liver to her bones, now from her bones to her lungs. And people are like, how did you carry all that? You weren't sharing it with her. Eventually she knew, but we didn't talk about it because she was losing so much weight. But I was like, you know what? Because I saw her laugh. I saw her achieve her goals. I saw us achieve our daily goals. All of a sudden, that really didn't matter. I learned a lot about impermanence. You know, none of us are meant to get out of life alive. It's the honest truth, right? We're meant to die, which is a hard thing to digest. But once we let that go, wow, all of a sudden you're liberated to really embrace it all.
And live in the moment, isn't it? It's living that day and living that day the best you can.
The best you can. And to a certain extent, there are no mistakes anymore. Because it's not that you're trying to get it all perfect. You're trying to experience it. And that's what shifted for us. Life became an experience, not something to control, not something to manage, not something to figure out. It was just, okay, today, right? And I say now that I realized during that period of time that we can only live an extraordinary life when we value the ordinary moments.
Oh,
because she and I had great experiences. I can't tell you about the 5-star hotels, but I can tell you about her giggling at friends. You know, that's the key, or that was the key. But when she passed away, I had learned, she became the founding director of palliative care with metastatic breast cancer.
Wow.
Super. I mean, she was just an amazing woman. She was an amazing woman.
Well, she left an amazing legacy, didn't she? For all that she did, the work she did in the time she had is far more than many people accomplish for, you know, living such a long life. So she lived life to the full, didn't she?
She certainly did. And thank you for saying that, because that's a point that sometimes I forget, is a lot of people have said to me, you know, it's so sad she died so young. And I'm like, well, her life was full of joy and accomplishment and just wonder, really. So maybe it was just she lived an accelerated life, because I know a lot of people that are 85, 90 years old, boy, they're not happy. They're not joyful.
Yeah.
So
and she worked right 2 weeks before she passed away, didn't she? She really pushed the boundaries right up, into as far as she could. So she didn't sort of submit to it. She fought it.
Yeah, as far as she could. And, there's a lot of confusion about the way she lived in palliative care. And, palliative care is about living your best life with a disease. Palliative care is not end of life. Hospice is end of life. Unfortunately, and if there are people listening, palliative care should be brought in the moment you're diagnosed with a chronic or terminal disease. It is something to help you live the best quality life you can. And so for my wife, that meant being aggressive with her treatments, working. I'm hoping I was in the equation.
I think you were. I think you empowered her to work, because you yourself, you took on the burden of all of the diagnoses that she didn't necessarily want to hear, because that would have distracted her from living her purpose.
100%. And I actually did wind up having to leave my own career, which I did willingly, because and it's funny, because I was an investment banker, right? The investment I was making in our life. Now, this is something I'd really like people to think about for one moment. I knew that the train was going to end, and probably sooner than later, because of the information I was getting. But it wasn't a lost investment. I was continuing to make an investment, not a sacrifice, an investment every day. And that was so much more rewarding than putting that energy into a job and making money. Of course, money was an issue when she passed away. I had a tremendous amount of debt, but it was still, to me, the return was so much greater by leaving my job and assisting her full time than having a nursing staff come in, or whatever the case would have been. I learned to do a lot of stuff. I could change TPN and draw blood from a port and all kinds of other crazy stuff.
Well, you couldn't win that time back,
No.
That was precious time.
You just used the word. That is so fantastic. and there's a woman named Jennifer O'Brien, and she wrote a book called A Hospice Doctor's Widow, a journal. And she has, it's a very short book, but so impactful. And she has a page about precious time. And I love it, because time is always precious. But when you confront a diagnosis, you're aware how precious it really is. The thing is, we have to wake up and treat it preciously without getting that wake-up call.
Yeah. You can get more money, you can get more of everything, but you can't get more time back.
Right. Right. And so when she passed away, and like I said, because, she was in palliative care, we learned the difference between extending life and extending death. I had learned so much, and she made the decision. She said 3 words to me, and I knew what she meant. She said, "Robert, I'm tired." And I said, "Okay, baby, rest." And I knew she was telling me to transition care. And within a couple of days after that day, actually, she fell into a coma. And the moment we transitioned care, all her vitals started to go down, because it was all that medicine that was, keeping the body active, but it was not sustainable. And she passed away soon after that. And what I realized is I still miss her. I miss her every moment of every day. But I knew it was the right thing. My ego didn't let me feel like a victim, that life took her from me. And it wasn't any of that. But what occurred for me was being so lost in my own life that I had to grieve my own death.
Wow.
And that was an amazing transition for me, because I grew so much through that.
Mm-hmm.
Because Robert, the caregiver, the husband, the lover, the friend, all of that life no longer existed.
Yeah. And I think that's a really important point you make there, because we forget about that, don't we, in the grieving process, is the trauma of the shift, not only in losing the person, but losing all of the aspects emotionally, physically, mentally, and spiritually that person gave you. You know, that emotional bond you had, as it were, the physical bond, the mental bond that you really, you know, she really inspired you. And also that spiritual bond, that purpose that you had associated with the work that you were doing to help her, all gets broken, and it just completely disappears. And it's hugely traumatic for people who lose a loved one.
So much so. In fact, what I realized, and I'm a big acronym guy. I mean, I love to create acronyms. They pop out of my head like, you know, a popcorn machine. So one thing I realized is loss at its core is the lack of self and security. You lose your identity, and the world doesn't feel safe anymore because something happened out of your control. That could be any loss.
It could be anything, yeah.
Erectile dysfunction for men, your identity is completely, you know, assaulted. Menopause for women, it could be a bunch of different things.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be losing a person. It could be losing something or something that you value.
Right, because loss and grief, they're tied by the amount of value we placed on that which we lost.
Exactly.
So grief for me was overwhelming, but it was because of my identity that I lost. And so the other acronym is there were 5 areas that I realized I had to pass through to recover. And that was guilt, whether I could have done something different, or survivor's guilt, whatever you, so much.
Which can be huge. I know my mum suffered this terribly when we lost my dad, when he passed away.
I was in control of all her supplements, and, you know, maybe I should have made sure she was, you know, took more supplements, but I can't tell you how many times she'd be like, Robert, I don't want to be married to a parent. You got to let me be. And it's right, because caregiving is not about fixing. Caregiving is about witnessing more than anything else. You have to let the person be a person and not a thing.
Yeah.
So, you know,
that's so important.
So important. When she was first diagnosed, I was like, you know, don't eat the sugar, it feeds cancer. And then it was sort of like, you know, she's got to live her life.
Yeah.
I can't let my fear interrupt her life's journey.
Yeah.
I have to.
And she's got, like you say, she's got to live the best life that she has, right, in a way that is going to serve her.
100%. So there was the guilt. There was rumination of constantly thinking about, she's gone. Who am I? She's gone. Everything's empty. There was understanding impermanence. There was letting go of expectations. The E in grief for me were expectations. My whole life, the construct I had for the way I was supposed to live my life was gone. Those expectations gone. Yeah. And the F is fear.
Yeah.
The fear of moving on, the fear of rebuilding, the fear of getting hurt again. I mean, wow, we could talk about a million different fears. And that's where I realized all the power was. The power to use everything I learned and to harness love instead of fear was actually to step past that. Because I asked myself the question, do I want to look back on my life and realize my fear of moving forward stopped me from living. Because if I'm not living, then I'm not expressing what she gave me, because that's a part of me. I say it all the time. It's a beautiful scar. I am beautifully scarred for having loved, cared for, and lost my wife. And so therefore, I asked myself that question, and that helped me push through fear. And there's a bunch of things that I did. And to tell you the truth, we talked about it earlier, right? The whole, reconnecting to your child. Mm-hmm. Loss is this big, right? It's huge. She was like this big hole all of a sudden. I couldn't find something to fill that hole, but I could find maybe something little and put that little tiny stone in the big circle, and then another little one, and another little one. And I started to daydream. I started to think about what little things I might like to do. The daydream brought me to Italy. The daydream said, look, life is short. The daydream said, look at what your wife accomplished, regardless of adversity. Where's the adversity in your life? Yes, you got hurt, Robert, but you're creating barriers because of that. And slowly I put it all together. And I just thought one day, wow, I've really learned a lot. And I didn't realize it, but I had become her life coach. And I said, wait a minute, what's the value in all these stories if you don't share them? And I say it often, that our stories, if we don't share them, are like taking a beautiful little, I love the Glass Menagerie, by the way. Did you remember that play from way back when? I can't remember.
I don't remember it. If my dad was here, he'd be like, Ruth, why don't you know it?
It's so sweet in a way. And, but it's about this little girl that has all these little glass figurines. And, if you think about all of our stories, if we don't share their beauty and we just put them in a little curio cabinet and lock them away, they're not really valuable.
Yeah.
And so I just finally said, I asked myself the question, I moved from what if I fail? To what if I succeed? And I wound up coming to Italy, teaching English for $8 an hour, because honestly, even though I was an investment banker, all my money went to taking care of my wife. And not just because of the US medical system. Partly, in 1997, to try to find supplements were next to impossible, and each bottle cost $50, and to try to find organic food. And that was
really difficult. And it's still hard today. Yeah.
So I was actually having organic products shipped from California.
Wow.
Plus, I was trying to make sure that if she was sad, or feeling sad, I'd be like, well, you know what? We have a long weekend. Do you want to go to Puerto Rico? Okay, credit card. And that all just accumulated to the point where there was nothing left at all. There was a 6-figure bill that had to be paid. So I went back to Dubai, but after everything got paid off, I said, the worst thing that can happen is I'll be, an X-age guy living with his mom. That was the worst case scenario. Because I didn't want to focus on the obstacles. I wanted to focus on the possibility. And that's where Possibility in Action was born, actually, the whole tagline.
And what was the first step? What could you remember back to the first step where you were able to turn the fear into possibility, into having that hope for yourself?
Sure. Actually, to tell you the truth, the first step was starting to think about what is the story I wanted to look back on at the end of my life. It was actually thinking about, okay, so here I am. And I have this belief that if we stay still, we're actually decaying. because the rest of the world is moving forward.
That's right. We pretty much do. we age faster.
There you go. We age faster. And so I thought to myself, okay, here I am. Is this what I want to be? No, of course, this is what I want to be. So what is the story I want to look back on? And that's where daydreaming became so important, because, you know, that's the beauty of being a child. Yeah. You can see all these possibilities, and I mean,
and no constraints. That's the thing, isn't there? We haven't created, as a child, we haven't created these constraints in our world that we've imposed on ourselves as adults. So there are no boundaries. Yes. Everything is a possibility.
Everything is a possibility. And so, and if you also think, let's say, about sadness, you know, at a funeral, if there are young children, they may look in the coffin and see grandma has passed away and will be sad. But if there are a few children in that little funeral room, that funeral hall, you know that after a certain amount of time, they'll be hiding behind trees and bushes and couches and playing.
And finding joy in the environment that other people have.
Exactly. So it was curiosity more than anything else, that when I started to allow myself to be curious, I wasn't making a commitment, right? That's the key, because I think we need to bathe ourselves in curiosity for a while.
Yeah.
Because making that commitment to move forward seems very uncomfortable, because how can I rebuild my life? That's, again, the guilt, right? Is this the right thing to do? I remember the first time I went on vacation by myself without Desiree, and I enjoyed myself. I was like, wow, that seems wrong. Like, she's not here to share it with. Though I still talk to her even every day. Now, I'm still talking to her. But it was that. So if you ask me anything, what helped me move through fear was allowing myself to be curious and daydream.
Wow. I'd love to get really curious now with sure. with other parts of your life and transition to the fun facts.
Okay.
So first of all, fun facts is the 5 pillars of brain health we're talking about, because I love mnemonics just like yourself. So F is for feelings, A is for actions, C is our connection to ourselves and others, T is the thoughts that we have, and S is our surroundings. So let's dive first into feelings. What is the funniest or most embarrassing thing that has ever happened to you?
You know, thinking about that, because I've seen your program. So I thought, you know what? I don't really label things as embarrassing, but what came to mind is Desiree was on the Oprah Winfrey Show.
Oh, and,
wow. I was in the audience, and I cried hysterically. I was the advertisement. So, you know, on Channel 7 in New York City, I was on TV for 2 weeks about the upcoming episode, and it was just me bawling in the audience, and people recognized me. And you know, even Oprah, she said to me off camera, she's like, "You got one ugly cry." I was so overwhelmed by everything that was happening. But I
think that's really beautiful, because crying is so important, and especially for men, it's something that often is held back, but it's so important to release it, because it's a release mechanism. It's a vital part of releasing emotion, coming back to riding the wave and not letting your boat capsize. Actually, you are riding the wave. You know, people perceive it as your boat's capsizing. It's quite the contrary. It's you are riding the wave and allowing that wave to dissipate in a constructive way.
100%.
So next one, actions. What is the most rewarding or fulfilling thing you've ever done?
Oh, that's easy. That was taking on the role of caregiver the way I did. 100%. That will be the most fulfilling, rewarding, joyful, purposeful thing I probably will ever do in my life, because
Wow.
it's that whole thing about sacrifice and investment. It was not a sacrifice. I know my life, my being in that amazing woman's life was allowing her to reach her dreams. And that's it.
And I think that's absolutely beautiful, because we do not give the carers enough credit for what they are able to help the person that's suffering accomplish during that journey that they go on. And I think it's, she went on that journey for 11 years, didn't she? Yeah. So it wasn't as if it was a short-term commitment. It was a really long-term commitment for yourself. And the fact that you were able to generate so much joy from the experience and achieve so much together by committing yourself to that, I think is really beautiful.
I would just like to say, because she played a big part in that, right? Where, like I said, we were very symbiotic, but one of the most beautiful things that came from that was a level of intimacy, of having, we didn't necessarily talk about death, but having deep conversations about fear and about living life and surrender and all these things. I mean, the intimacy she and I shared on a mental level, which actually wound up taking place at the physical level as she journeyed, because in the last year and a half of her life, physically, it was impossible for us to have except for holding hands or something like that. So that was so amazing to experience. And that's a part of that whole package that, wow, I watched her, I joke about this all the time, because I watched her evolve, like Maslow says self-actualization. I awakened. I was way behind her. And that's what was so beautiful about that experience.
Yeah. And I think it's something that, few people actually experience in the way that you have been able to experience that deep connection with someone who's going on a very difficult journey. I really hope you enjoyed that conversation. Thank you so much for listening. Please be sure to like and share this episode and leave a review on my website or on Apple Podcasts. If you're looking for opportunities to optimize your brain health or unchain your pain from a past trauma, make sure you visit my website, www.ruthmaryallan.com, and use the code podcast10 at checkout to get 10% off all programs. And always remember, you are not stuck with the brain you have. You have the power to make it better. You have the power to unchain your pain and optimize your brain power and performance so that you can win back energy and time doing what you love. Each episode of Brain Health Unchaining Your Pain with Dr. Ruth Allan is for educational and demonstration purposes only. The information shared in each episode should not be interpreted as medical advice. This episode should not be used to self-diagnose or self-treat any health, medical or physical condition. Do not use this episode to avoid going to your healthcare professional or to replace the advice they give you. Consult with a trusted healthcare professional before doing anything contained in this episode. If you have any questions or concerns, please contact www.ruthmaryallan.com/connect.